The morning sun cast a pale, brittle light over the scarred European landscape. A broken patchwork of craters, shattered hedgerows, and smoke that twisted upward from the remnants of yesterday's battles. As the American 76mm Shermans lined up along the muddy flanks of the Ardennes, their treads pressing into the cold, wet earth with a deliberate rhythm that spoke of tense anticipation, of men and machines poised at the edge of the impossible. The HVAP rounds tucked into ready racks within the armored hulls representing a quiet, lethal promise that would soon unfold in a way that the Wehrmacht had neither anticipated nor comprehended. For the Germans, confident in the invulnerability of their Panthers and the mastery of their Tiger units, had believed the war in these forests and rolling fields was to be dictated by their precision, firepower, and experience, underestimating the ingenuity of American gunnery and the raw science packed into each hypervelocity armor-piercing shell, a tiny spear of metal capable of rewriting the rules of engagement in a heartbeat. The air itself seeming to hum with tension as tank crews checked gauges, whispered instructions, and readied themselves for a confrontation that would not only test skill, but redefine the art of armored warfare. The soft clinking of rounds, the mechanical growl of engines warming, and the distant echo of artillery forming a symphony of impending chaos that none in those hedgerows could fully grasp. Each Sherman a paradox of seeming vulnerability and hidden power. Its 76mm gun, a precision instrument capable of penetrating Panther armor at ranges previously thought safe by German doctrine, the very existence of HVAP rounds turning what had been cautious German advances into exercises in fatal miscalculation. And as the first Panther columns emerged from the tree line, confident, disciplined, and under the illusion of near invincibility, the American crews focused, eyes sharp behind periscopes and vision blocks, calculating angles, distances, and elevation with quiet intensity, knowing that the coming moments would demand every ounce of their training, every second of nerve. As HVAP shells were rammed home, breach closed, and the targeting sights aligned with the cold, ruthless mathematics of destruction, and when the first round fired, it cut through the air with a shrill whistle that was almost inaudible beneath the thunderous roar of engines and artillery. A streak of precision and kinetic fury that met the Panther's frontal armor, the explosion inside the hull not visible but understood by the trembling suspension, the sudden smoke and the hissing of ruptured coolant, the Germans taken aback, incredulous at the sudden, impossible lethality of what they had dismissed as a medium tank's weapon, and as the next HVAP round followed, another Panther crew scrambled, attempting evasive maneuvers. Their trust in doctrine and armor shattered by the undeniable, precise, and repeated impact of these small but devastating projectiles. The Americans feeling the tense exhilaration and gravity of this new battlefield reality, the forest echoing with the mix of mechanical fury, shouted commands, and distant gunfire, the hedgerows becoming a theater of physics and courage, strategy and sheer nerve, each shell carving through the air, bending trajectories that the Germans thought predictable, every impact a lesson in the brutal calculus of modern armored warfare, and as the engagement escalated, one by one, Panther after Panther succumbed to the invisible spear of HVAP, rolling over, fire blossoming from their hatches, crews scrambling in disbelief, while the Shermans, nimble and calculated, adjusted positions, loaded the next rounds and repeated the dance of destruction. The battlefield alive with tension, smoke, and the metallic scent of hot engines and scorched earth, and in that charged air, the realization spread among German tankers that a paradigm had shifted, that the monstrous armor and confidence that had carried them through Europe now faced an unseen adversary whose science and preparation had neutralized decades of advantage. And for the American crews, exhilaration mingled with the sober knowledge of how fragile victory was. The HVAP rounds had not only given them a technical edge, but had rewritten expectations, turning the terrifying Panthers into vulnerable targets. Their psychological dominance fractured, and as the morning bled into noon, the Shermans continued their methodical destruction, each shot a statement, each impact a revelation, and through smoke, dust, and echoes of command, the battlefield had transformed into a proving ground for the audacity of American engineering, the deadly cleverness of HVAP, and the courage of those who pressed forward. proving that even a seemingly medium-weight tank could wield the power to challenge and overturn the myth of invincible German armor, leaving the survivors, both German and American, forever changed by what they had seen, felt, and survived. The stakes of armored warfare recalibrated in a single morning of kinetic precision, tension, and unprecedented lethality. The echoes of HVAP's thunder reverberating in minds, hearts, and across history, marking the first point in a tale of courage, science, and battlefield ingenuity that would forever define the Sherman's place in armored combat lore. And as the sun dipped behind clouds of smoke and fire, the crews of both sides would remember that morning as a turning point. A cruel, exhilarating, and unforgettable lesson in how one technological edge, one calculated shell, could rewrite the rules, test the limits of courage, and leave an indelible mark on the landscape of war. As the smoke from the first engagements hung low over the jagged forest edges, curling around shattered hedgerows and scorched earth, the American crews of the 76mm Shermans moved with a deliberate, almost ritualistic precision, each man knowing that every second counted, that the HVAP rounds resting in their racks were not just ammunition, but instruments of calculated inevitability, the kind that could, with one perfect strike, unseat the fearsome reputation of a Panther tank and tilt the balance of battle in ways that artillery alone could never achieve. And as the Shermans advanced through mud and debris, the crew chiefs barked measured commands. The gunners adjusted their sights for range, elevation, and armor angle, while the radio operators whispered updates from observation posts, relaying the exact positions, movement speed, and potential vulnerabilities of the German tanks, each detail logged mentally, a silent calculation of probabilities and outcomes, and the Panthers, confident in their thick frontal armor and the audacity of their crews, moved forward with mechanical grace, unaware that the very physics that had protected them against conventional ammunition now betrayed them in the form of hypervelocity projectiles designed to pierce, disrupt, and destroy with precision that defied ordinary comprehension. The first HVAP round tore through the dense morning air, leaving a faint, almost inaudible whistle, before striking the glacis of a Panther, ripping through armor and sending crew and machinery into a state of chaotic disarray, smoke and fire erupting in a violent blossom that seemed almost suspended in time. The Germans scrambling, shouting, attempting to counteract the invisible mathematics of American engineering, the battlefield alive with the cacophony of shouts, engine roars, and the metallic ring of high-speed impacts. Yet the Shermans, nimble and calculated, pressed forward. Guns cycling with rhythmic precision, each HVAP round a deliberate statement of intent, bending trajectories to match the Panther's armor profile, exploiting weak points with scientific exactitude, and as one Panther fell after another, the psychological shock among German crews became palpable, a creeping realization that the rules they had relied on, the doctrines that had carried them to dominance, were being rewritten in real time by technology, training, and courage, and within the Shermans, the tension and exhilaration were almost inseparable, the gunners' hands steady on the triggers, their eyes tracking each movement, reading the subtle shifts of a Panther's turret, the angle of its hull, the sway of its suspension, feeding calculations into a mental algorithm that merged human instinct with technological advantage. While the commanders adjusted formations to maximize firing arcs and minimize exposure, turning the battlefield into a dynamic chessboard, where every shot fired was both attack and defense. And as the sun climbed higher, illuminating smoke-choked horizons, flares of gunfire and shattered earth, the HVAP rounds continued to pierce, puncture, and explode, each impact reinforcing the emerging narrative. No tank was invulnerable, no doctrine infallible, and no battlefield advantage permanent, as engineers' designs, decades of research, and months of practical experimentation manifested in deadly arcs of metal through air, and German crews, for all their experience and valor, found themselves trapped in a disorienting reality where calculations that once seemed sound were now fatal misjudgments. And amid the chaos, the Shermans maneuvered with surprising fluidity, leveraging mobility, speed, and range to exploit every opportunity, their engines growling as they adjusted, reloaded, and fired. The battlefield a dynamic theater of physics, courage, and audacity, each shot a measured gamble with deadly certainty. The sound of armor being penetrated, fires erupting, and engines stalling, creating a rhythm that was terrifying yet mesmerizing, as if the very earth itself acknowledged the transformative power of HVAP, a weapon that redefined the balance between medium tank and heavy Panther, turning the fearsome invader into a manageable, if still dangerous, target. And as the day wore on, the Sherman's crews realized that their success was not merely chance, but the culmination of foresight, meticulous testing, and the unyielding determination to challenge assumptions, to force an evolution in armored warfare that would resonate far beyond that single battlefield, as each tank, each crew, and each round contributed to a narrative of ingenuity overcoming brute force, transforming anxiety into deadly precision, and instilling in both sides a newfound respect for technology, for courage, and for the deadly calculus of modern mechanized combat. And when the final German tanks of the advance fell, burning or retreating in disarray, the Shermans, though battered and blackened with smoke, stood as testaments to the audacity of human engineering, a quiet yet overwhelming assertion that calculated risk, precision, and relentless innovation could redefine the meaning of invincibility on the battlefield. And as the crews surveyed the results, the silence of victory mixed with exhaustion. The HVAP rounds had not only killed tanks, they had shattered myths, recalibrated expectations, and written a new chapter in armored warfare, one where ingenuity, courage, and science triumphed against what had seemed insurmountable, leaving both sides indelibly marked by the deadly arcs of these high-velocity projectiles, and echoing the eternal lesson that preparation, innovation, and decisiveness could transform ordinary weapons into instruments of legend, leaving the Germans in stunned disbelief and the Americans aware that the future of armored combat had irrevocably changed, a deadly prelude to a larger story of courage, precision, and the quiet genius behind every HVAP round fired on that fateful morning. When dawn broke over the shattered landscape of France, the light didn't fall gently. It sliced through the drifting smoke and clung to the wreckage of burned-out tanks, the twisted steel carcasses of what had once been the pride of the Wehrmacht, Panthers, their thick armor riddled with holes from a new, terrifying kind of ammunition the Germans could neither see coming nor comprehend at first. And deep inside the American tank columns, in the humid, claustrophobic interiors of 76mm Shermans, crews sat drenched in sweat, their hands trembling not from fear but from the adrenaline of realizing that, for the first time in the war, they possessed a weapon that gave them a fighting chance against the enemy's most feared beast, a chance born not from luck, but from the mind of engineers who had refused to accept defeat, who had spent sleepless nights refining metallurgy, studying ballistics and calculating how to turn a lightweight, mobile tank into a precision killer that could puncture the heart of German steel with raw velocity. Because the story of HVAP, the hypervelocity armor-piercing round, was not just about a bullet. It was about evolution under fire, a desperate adaptation born from blood and necessity, forged in the laboratories and battlefields that together defined the chaos of 1944, where the Allies' advance was often slowed not by terrain or supply lines, but by the looming silhouette of a Panther or Tiger tank, its gun trained with mechanical patience, daring any Sherman to rise above cover. And as the months dragged on, the Americans knew something had to change, because while bravery could win skirmishes, it could not pierce armor, and every encounter with a Panther was a brutal reminder that courage alone could not stop high-velocity death. So when the first shipments of HVAP arrived, sleek, silver, and strange, the crews looked at them with both reverence and disbelief, touching them as if they were relics, weapons of myth, uncertain whether these tungsten-cored rounds could really do what they were told, punch through 100 millimeters of sloped German steel at 1,000 yards, something that, until then, had sounded like fantasy. And the first time an American gunner squeezed the trigger and saw an HVAP round cut through a Panther's frontal plate like it was tin foil, a hush fell over the crew, a silence so profound it drowned out even the ringing in their ears, because they realized that in that instant the entire calculus of armored warfare had shifted, that the Germans' reliance on superior armor was no longer absolute. that the playing field had been leveled not by more armor or heavier guns, but by intelligence, by engineering that turned a medium tank into an apex predator. And as word spread through the ranks, the morale of American crews surged like wildfire. Whispered stories spreading faster than the tanks themselves. A single HVAP round burned through a Panther at 800 yards. The Krauts didn't even know what hit them. You could see the exit hole glow like a furnace. Each story, both myth and truth, amplified by the awe of soldiers who, for months, had felt like prey and now suddenly felt like hunters. Because for every shattered Panther, there was also shattered German confidence, and the effect was psychological as much as physical. The Germans beginning to question their invincibility, to second-guess their own doctrines, to wonder if the enemy had found a way to outthink them rather than outgun them. And they had, because the HVAP round wasn't about brute force, it was about efficiency, precision, and the physics of penetration. A tungsten core dense enough to maintain its velocity through impact, shedding almost no energy as it punched through the hardest steel. A projectile so fast that the human eye couldn't trace its flight, its path defined only by the explosion that followed. And in that instant of impact, when tungsten met armor, the heat and force created a miniature sun inside the tank, igniting ammunition, fuel, and flesh alike, turning even the proudest German panzers into blazing tombs. And in that inferno of twisted iron and smoke, the myth of German armor superiority began to crumble, replaced by an uneasy realization that the Americans had closed the gap. That innovation could destroy even the most formidable advantage. And yet, what made HVAP truly extraordinary wasn't just its killing power, it was its rarity. Its scarcity, because tungsten was precious, essential for tools, drills, and industry, meaning each HVAP round was more than a bullet. It was an investment, a promise of decisive power reserved for critical moments. For when the odds were steep and the stakes higher still, and so Sherman crews treated each round like gold, counting them, saving them, whispering small prayers before loading them into the breach, knowing that each pull of the trigger might decide not only their fate but the course of the battle. And as the Allied push toward Germany intensified, the clash of doctrines became visible in every shattered village and burned-out field. Brute armor versus scientific precision, the immovable versus the unstoppable, and every encounter became a proving ground for human ingenuity under fire. With HVAP rounds streaking across the battlefield like arrows of vengeance, rewriting the physics of fear, and in the aftermath of each battle, amid the wreckage of tanks and the bodies of men who had believed themselves invincible, the Americans would walk among the smoking shells, marveling not just at their victory but at the quiet, terrifying truth of it, that wars were not won by the strongest or the bravest alone, but by those who refused to stop thinking, by those who dared to question limits and to turn imagination into weaponry. And as engineers back home analyzed the data, improved the designs, and refined the balance of materials, they unknowingly paved the way for the next generation of warfare, where intelligence and material science would forever outpace brute armor, and the lessons of HVAP would echo in every future weapon, that the key to survival was not to be the biggest, but to be the smartest. And on that realization, somewhere deep in the forests of Belgium, as night fell and the fires of battle dimmed, a single American tank crew sat in silence, their HVAP racks empty, their hearts pounding, staring at the smoldering silhouette of 3 destroyed Panthers, and one of them, his voice hoarse from shouting, whispered the words that would later echo across history. They never saw it coming. The early morning mist clung to the forest edges, curling around the twisted trunks of trees, shrouding the roads and fields in a ghostly veil as the Sherman column advanced cautiously, engines rumbling low but steady, and every gunner, loader, and driver knew that ahead lay the hunting ground of Panthers, those mechanized predators of the German army, glinting their thick frontal plates in the filtered sunlight, their crew inside unaware that the Americans carried a secret that would turn every encounter into a nightmare for them. Because HVAP rounds were not merely ammunition, they were a revolution in metallurgy and physics, crafted from tungsten carbide, forged with precision, designed to maintain incredible velocity over hundreds of yards, to pierce, punch, and explode within armor like a lightning strike confined to a single path. And as the Shermans rolled forward, their commanders barking quiet orders, each crewman feeling the subtle vibrations through the hull, the knowledge of the stakes pressing down, they understood the strange mix of fear and exhilaration that comes when one holds in their hands the power to defy what had seemed unassailable. That moment when physics, courage, and engineering merge into one terrifyingly effective instrument, and when the first HVAP round tore through a Panther's glacis plate from over 1,000 yards, punching a clean hole, throwing sparks, splinters, and shrapnel across the interior, the American crew inside the Sherman heard the subtle reverberation of metal bending, a sound so alien, so precise, it became the herald of doom for every German tank in the area. And simultaneously, across the field, the German crews felt a creeping disbelief, as rounds that should have ricocheted harmlessly were instead entering their armored sanctuaries, destroying engines, igniting ammunition, and shattering morale. And the psychological effect was immediate. Where once the Panthers had inspired confidence, now even the most hardened German tankers hesitated, second-guessing their approach, questioning whether the massive expenditure of manpower and steel was sufficient to withstand an enemy who had learned to turn speed and density into a weapon more devastating than brute armor. And as battles unfolded across hedgerows and villages, each engagement became a symphony of destruction, with HVAP rounds streaking silently across the landscape, tracing arcs through smoke and morning fog, hitting targets with near-perfect accuracy, and leaving behind trails of fire, twisted steel, and shattered doctrine, teaching the Germans a lesson that would haunt them for the remainder of the campaign. That ingenuity and adaptation could overturn even the most formidable defenses, that their sense of invulnerability was an illusion, and that the age of unbreachable armor had ended with a whisper of tungsten and a flash of impact. And in the midst of all this, American crews developed a profound respect for the combination of skill, calculation, and nerve that had brought them this advantage, knowing that each round spent had to be measured, conserved, and deployed with careful judgment. For HVAP ammunition was finite, precious, and capable of making the difference between life and death, victory and annihilation. So every pull of the firing mechanism was accompanied by the unspoken awareness that they were writing history, reshaping armored warfare and defying expectations at every turn. And when night fell and the fields were littered with the wreckage of Panthers, half buried in mud, half burned in fire, their crews disoriented and shattered, the Americans quietly retreated, tanks purring, lights dimmed, and in that calm, officers and soldiers alike understood that the strategic impact of HVAP would echo far beyond that day, that it had not only leveled the playing field but had shattered the myth of German tank supremacy, instilling in the Allies a confidence that propelled them toward the Rhine. And in private conversations, the young gunner would remark, eyes wide, voice trembling with awe, "It's not the size of the tank, it's the velocity of the round." And that simple truth learned in the heat of battle would become the lesson ingrained in armored warfare forever, a lesson written in smoke, fire, and the silent, deadly precision of the HVAP round that had transformed Shermans into hunters and Panthers into prey, leaving a mark on history that no amount of steel or pride could erase. Dawn bled slowly across the war-torn countryside, a thin veil of mist curling over cratered fields, shattered hedgerows, and the remnants of villages reduced to rubble, while the 76 Shermans rumbled cautiously forward, engines low, tracks grinding over debris, their crews alert, hearts hammering, eyes scanning for any hint of movement. And in the distance, the dark silhouettes of Panthers appeared, their thick, imposing frontal armor glinting in the pale light. Each tank a mechanical nightmare built to crush infantry and Shermans alike. Yet unknown to their crews, the Americans had an edge that would rewrite the rules of engagement, a secret lying within the small but incredibly dense HVAP round, which carried velocity, precision, and penetration power that mocked conventional armor. And as the first Sherman aimed, calculating distance, angle, wind, and elevation, the round streaked silently through the dawn sky, a spear of tungsten energy designed to conquer what brute force could not. And when it struck the Panther's glacis plate, the result was instantaneous, violent, and mesmerizing. Metal groaned, bolts sheared, fire and smoke erupted from the interior, and the psychological impact was as devastating as the physical, as German crews froze in disbelief, realizing that the Shermans they had long dismissed as undergunned and fragile now wielded the power to destroy their most feared machines, while American gunners felt a surge of adrenaline tempered by professional focus, calculating each shot, measuring distance, adjusting aim, and firing again, and with every HVAP impact, the battlefield became a theater of chaos and revelation. Panthers toppled, engines died, and men scrambled for cover, forced to confront a reality they had never imagined, that skill, science, and ingenuity could overcome the raw advantage of armor. And as the Shermans pushed through, every engagement became a lesson in tactical adaptation, with units learning to coordinate fire, maneuver strategically, and exploit every advantage the HVAP rounds provided, their crews developing an almost instinctive understanding of velocity, trajectory, and armor thickness, a language of war that transcended doctrine. And amid the smoke, dust, and groaning metal, officers and sergeants observed, calculated, and adjusted strategy, knowing that these rounds had not only increased survivability, but could decisively shift the outcome of engagements. And in those tense moments, the emotional weight of warfare settled over everyone. Fear, exhilaration, awe, and grim satisfaction intermingled as men understood the consequences of every shot, every decision, and every movement. While across the battlefield, German commanders watched helplessly as their Panthers, the supposed kings of armor, fell one by one, their crews disoriented and demoralized, and the sheer efficiency of the HVAP-equipped Shermans became evident, forcing the Germans to reconsider their approach, tactics, and even doctrine, while American engineers and artillerymen, though distant from the front lines, felt a profound vindication as reports reached them of their creations performing beyond expectation, rewriting the rules of tank warfare and leaving an indelible mark on the campaign in Europe, proving that innovation and courage could level the playing field and that even the mightiest armored predator could be brought down by a combination of intellect, precision, and relentless determination. And as the sun rose higher, illuminating smoke and twisted steel alike, the Shermans pressed forward, advancing through forests, crossing rivers and dominating fields, each HVAP round a testament to human ingenuity, turning fear into confidence, chaos into calculation, and potential into historical reality, while the Germans, humbled, forced to adapt or perish, realized too late that their assumptions about armor and invincibility had been shattered, leaving them to ponder the terrifying efficiency of a weapon system that had transformed an underdog tank into a predator. And as the day closed, the Shermans regrouped, crews exhausted but triumphant, the battlefield littered with the remains of Panthers, the lesson of HVAP forever ingrained in the minds of all who witnessed its power, a truth as stark and undeniable as the shattered tanks themselves. Innovation, precision, and audacity could change the course of battles, the fate of armies, and the history of armored warfare forever. As twilight descended upon the shattered fields of Europe, the last vestiges of sunlight glinting off jagged steel and pools of smoke, the 76mm Shermans pressed forward with relentless precision, their engines a low, menacing growl over the scarred terrain, while the crews inside adjusted controls, exchanged terse nods, and braced for the final encounters of the day, the battlefield a tense chessboard of movement, cover, and lethal calculation, and amid it all, the HVAP rounds, small, dense, and devastatingly fast, flew from the barrels like streaks of controlled fury, slicing through the air with perfect accuracy, striking Panther after Panther, each hit resonating with the sound of shattering metal, erupting fire, and startled German cries, their heavily armored machines now nothing more than flaming husks. And the psychological impact was as profound as the physical devastation. For every German tank destroyed with such seemingly improbable efficiency sowed panic, disbelief, and disorientation among the remaining forces, as they realized that what they had once feared as the Sherman's weakness, underpowered guns, fragile armor, was now its most potent weapon, a transformation wrought by science, ingenuity, and daring. And as the American tankers maneuvered through forests, across rivers, and over fields of broken earth, Each HVAP round fired was a precise orchestration of calculation and courage, factoring distance, wind, armor angles, and trajectory. And with every successful strike, the crews felt the combined weight of exhilaration, fear, and the grim reality of war, knowing that their effectiveness today could save countless lives tomorrow. While across the battlefield, German commanders attempted to rally, reposition, and retaliate. But the sheer efficiency of the HVAP-equipped Shermans made their every maneuver precarious, their every advance perilous. As the Americans dictated the tempo of engagement, dictating the rules, and forcing the enemy into reactive desperation, and amid the smoke and fire, soldiers and tank crews alike bore witness to a revolution in armored combat. Panthers, once feared and revered, toppled one by one, their crews scrambling for survival, while the Shermans advanced methodically, calculating, relentless, almost omnipotent in their mechanical and human coordination. And as night fully enveloped the battlefield, moonlight casting pale silver over twisted steel and smoldering wrecks, the last Panthers fell, the surviving Germans retreating into darkness, their morale shattered, their strategy undone, and the American tankers, exhausted but unbroken, regrouped, engines cooling, tracks spinning softly over dirt. And in those quiet moments, the significance of what had occurred sank in. The HVAP rounds, the result of ingenuity and daring, had not only neutralized the technological advantage of the Panther, but had rewritten the doctrine of armored warfare, proving that even the most formidable adversary could be overcome with clever engineering, precision, and audacity. And as the crews surveyed the field, the smell of gunpowder, burning metal, and sweat heavy in the air, they knew history had been made that day. A transformation in the art of combat that would resonate in every armored engagement thereafter. And the suspense of survival, the thrill of success, and the weight of consequence coalesced into a singular, unforgettable moment. A testament to human determination and the unyielding power of innovation, leaving behind a battlefield littered with Panther wrecks, a story of courage and intellect triumphing over brute force, and an enduring lesson that no armor is invincible, no tactic immutable, when ingenuity and precision are brought to bear. As the final fires of the day flickered and died, leaving the Sherman crews to stand silently, surveying the transformed landscape, the echo of HVAP rounds lingering in memory, and a profound understanding that the war, and armored warfare forever, had been irrevocably changed by what the Germans had never expected. As the last light of day faded across the battle-scarred fields, silence settled like a shroud over what had once been a cacophony of engines, gunfire and human shouts, and the 76mm Shermans, their tracks coated with mud and bloodied earth, sat like silent sentinels amidst the remnants of Panthers and shattered fortifications, the crews emerging from their tanks with exhaustion etched into every line of their faces, yet their eyes glimmering with the weight of victory and the knowledge of survival. For the HVAP rounds had not only destroyed the German armor, but had rewritten the very rules of engagement in armored warfare, proving that precision, ingenuity, and calculated risk could overcome brute force. And as they surveyed the battlefield, the men saw more than wreckage. They saw a testament to human ingenuity, the manifestation of engineering audacity, the culmination of countless hours spent in design rooms, firing ranges, and simulations. And every twisted metal carcass, every shattered turret, every plume of smoke rising from a fallen Panther told a story of strategy meeting technology, courage meeting opportunity, and preparation meeting fate. And beyond the immediate triumph, the crews understood the broader impact. Doctrine, morale, and enemy expectations had been shattered, the myth of Panther invincibility undone, and the legacy of HVAP-equipped Shermans cemented in history and in that reflective twilight as the wind whispered through shattered trees and the first stars appeared overhead. The veterans of the battlefield felt the profound weight of what had been accomplished, the combined effort of engineers, tank crews, and strategists converging to change the course of armored combat forever, leaving behind lessons that would echo in military academies, history books, and the memories of all who survived. A silent but resounding confirmation that foresight, innovation, and precise execution could turn even the smallest advantage into overwhelming power. and as the crews quietly packed up, extinguished fires, and began the long trek back to base, the field of destroyed Panthers remained a stark, unyielding reminder that the unexpected could be decisive, that cleverness could topple might, and that the Sherman, once underestimated, had become a legend, its HVAP rounds a symbol of technological triumph and human resolve, leaving a legacy not measured only in destroyed tanks, but in the confidence, awe, and reverence instilled in every American soldier who had fired them, and in every enemy who had witnessed their lethal efficiency, a testament that ingenuity, courage, and precision could alter history. And that day, amid the smoke, the mud, and the twilight, history itself had been rewritten,